Welcome to Financial Aid Basics. My name's Christina Winstead. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director for College Access Initiatives at the Washington Student Achievement Council. I am a big financial aid dork, so I'm excited to talk to you about my favorite topic. Today, I just want to start with our training intention. And our intention of this training is to help you familiarize yourself with the financial aid process. In our trainings, we really draw from our own expertise and the time that we've worked in financial aid and with students. But we want to acknowledge that everybody has their own unique lived experience and that can impact how they engage and perceive financial aid. And so we want to make sure that when we are working with students, we're meeting them where they're at. And so we provide this training and attention just to ensure. I know that we use personal stories and stories from students to help really cement the learning of the training. And when we talk to students, and the time I've worked with students, I'll always ask, like, can I share this with other students so they know why not to take your financial aid money and go to Vegas and other things like, and students will be like, yes, please tell them that that money was meant for books and I didn't know that. So a lot of the times we have these experiences, we share them to help cement that learning. We're part of AIM Higher Washington, which is an organization, really, it's an initiative to help increase financial aid completion rates across the state. We're really looking at how can we best impact financial aid completion and college access through a lens of equity. This includes a community and technical colleges for state board. You have us through WASAC. You have the Independent Colleges of Washington, the Council of Presidents, and OSPI. All of those organizations together, we support this training effort so that there's one place to get trained across the state. And we use this also, we support this with 12th year and other programs. We try to connect these so that it's a collaborative effort to support not just the students, but those who are doing the work across the state. Today, we're going to talk about what financial aid is, the types of financial aid that are available, a financial aid timeline, including the timeline for 25-26, the steps to applying for financial aid. And of course, we have lots of resources to support you, and we'll talk about next steps. First, I want to start with data on financial aid completion. So, over half of our Washington seniors last year didn't complete a financial aid application. If you're looking at this data and you're feeling like, "Ugh, we worked so hard, it seems like why did the numbers dip a little bit?" It's because last year's rollout of financial aid, particularly the FAFSA, was challenging, and students weren't able to participate in that process fully until, for some students, until March, April even. And so this did decrease our financial aid completion a little bit, but thanks to all of the hard work everyone did over summer and in spring, it's not as bad as people think. That we're actually, it's a whole national decline in completion rates because of the release. And we're all working hard. I see this as an opportunity to engage not just the class of 25, but the class of 24 as well. And I know that if you're looking at this data, I don't want anyone to beat themselves up over this. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I worked so hard and nothing happened, not one single individual is going to change financial aid completion across the state. We're all going to work together to do this. So if you're feeling bummed out, find me at my next training. If you see me at WASCA, Wisher, any of the other events, I always have chocolate. Come and see me. We will sit down. We're going to eat some chocolate and talk about why, even though these numbers look challenging, how amazing everyone is and the work that we did and how we're pivoted to do even better this year. So please don't take it to heart. Just know that we have more opportunities and we're here to support you. So let's talk about financial aid. What is it? Where does it come from? This deck that we're using here, there's a similar deck that you can use with students that is a shorter deck. It's not the full hour. It's going to be more like a 25-minute presentation to help students understand financial aid and where it comes from that has some of these slides. So as I talk through them, we also have talking points that you can use when working with students. Financial aid is simply money to make education after high school more affordable, and it includes grants, loans, work study, and scholarships as the four main types. So let's talk a little bit more about those four main types of funding. So financial aid, we look at it as an umbrella. And I know in Washington, especially on the west side, we don't like umbrellas, but for the purposes of financial aid, I'm encouraging you, please embrace the umbrella. Financial aid is an umbrella of four main types of funding. And so a lot of people think it's just one application, but there is one application, and then there's other types of funding that have separate applications like scholarships. So we'll start with the first one. My favorite, absolute favorite type of funding are grants. Grants are gift aid. There are federal grants, state grants, and institutional grants. If your student gets a grant, you're going to be like, high five, congratulations, that is gift aid. We'll talk more about it in a second, but it is, again, my favorite. Then we have scholarships. There are so many misconceptions about scholarships. People think that you have to be like a 4.0 student and or like super good at sports ball to be able to get a full scholarship or a scholarship in general. And I'm here to tell you, as the poster child of a 90s slacker, I got scholarships and your students can too. They need to be the student that applies. And so there's a lot of opportunities with scholarships, and we'll talk more about some really cool ones here in a second. Then we have our loans. Loans, I know I'm not supposed to pick favorites and least favorites, but loans are my least favorite. They are also the reality for a lot of students. We want to make sure they're informed consumers of their loans. Loans can be income based, there are federal and private loans. Finally, we have work study. Work study is income based. There's federal, state, and institutional work study funds. We'll talk more about the work study program. So we know we have the full umbrella here, but let's deep dive a little bit more. So grants. The reason I love grants so much is because I was the recipient of what's called the state need grant. And the Washington College grant is just an improved version of that. So the funding I receive from Washington State and federal funding, it's literally why I'm able to do something I love every single day and get paid a family wage for it. And that's all I want for our students. I want them to find what they love to do that earns a family wage and map out where they are now and how to get to that. And then use all these beautiful funding sources to make it as cheap as possible. So grants are amazing. And in Washington State, we have the Washington College Grant. So this is gift aid. And for grants, they don't have to be repaid unless the student like maybe owes a refund or doesn't meet what's called satisfactory academic progress, or SAP. And I know, just like real SAP, SAP is sticky. It means that students must complete a certain percentage of the classes they attempt. So it doesn't mean if they fail one class, they're going to owe back. But let's say, and I have an example here in a minute, but there could be situations where they have to pay back. The other piece of SAP is maintaining a specific GPA or higher. And typically it's around a 2.0 GPA. That's a C average. Again, from the poster child of a 90 slacker, I could do it and they can do it too. And so for SAP, students want to be really careful with that. Here's my example. My first quarter, I was teaching at a community college. I was very excited about teaching. And I wanted to be fun, hip, young teacher. So I made goodie bags. I went too young. I made goodie bags. And and so it was really funny because the students didn't expect that. Kind of looked like a kindergartner's birthday party. Day one, all my students show up. Day two, all but one of my students show up, and I get ghosted by that last student. So fast forward to finals. I'm giving my finals. I had a food buffet with finals because I figured people want to eat their meals and they had to present in front of the class. So the student just sneaks in and starts taking food from the buffet, and I think, I'm a professor and a chef now. But the reality was the student came up to me and said, "Oh, hi, I'm in your class." And I'm like, "Are you? I don't remember you." And she's like, "I showed up on day one." I'm like, "Well, today's the last day. Let's sit down and eat that eggplant rollatini and talk about what happened between the two dates." And she said, "Y'all sent me a check." I said, "Yeah, for your books." So there was no Post-it note or anything that said books in there. So I don't know if you know this, but Alaska Airlines had like this anniversary sale, and like you could go to Vegas for $30. So me and my bestie took the money and went to Vegas, and my heart just sunk because I knew at that point the student hadn't attended my class, so maybe they didn't attend the others. That student received the money, never attended their classes, and failed them. They did owe a refund, and we were able to work with them and another organization to help get them back on track. But we want to make sure students know gift aid, amazing for going to college, not for going to Vegas. We want them to use those funds that way. One of the things I love about Washington is we have the most equitable financial aid package in the nation. And so, what that means is we have entitlement based funding. This is the student's money. They're entitled to it as long as they're eligible. So, I always tell students this is your money. You just have to apply. The Washington College Grant is a groundbreaking commitment that really serves our middle and low income families. And it's on a sliding scale and it can cover more programs. So, what I love about this is it not just covers the bachelor's and your associates, but it can also cover apprenticeships and other types of training programs. A family of four making less than 78,500 will be eligible for a full tuition award, and a family of four making up to 120,500 will get some sort of sliding scale gift aid. It's really easy to determine how much a family might be eligible for Washington state funding by using this calculator. The Washington state calculator simply asks three questions and then tells students what they might be eligible for based upon the answers they gave us. What I like about this is if you're doing financial aid and you have a parent who's like, I'm not going to do the financial aid portion for my student, I take them to the calculator first because it's three questions so they can see what their student would be missing out on. That way the conversation can shift from like I'm just not going to do this to like what are you concerned about and here's what you're going to be missing out on if you can't provide that information for your student. Let's talk about scholarships. So, I think, again, there's misconceptions about scholarships. There are scholarships for students who are left handed. There are scholarships for students who can write a short essay on how they're going to survive the zombie apocalypse. There are scholarships for everything. I highly encourage students to pursue, if they are going into a STEM field and meet income guidelines, to pursue the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship. It's amazing. The other option too is the Washboard, which is a website that matches students' profiles to scholarships. Also, foundation scholarships at the college. Ultimately, we just want students to apply. Be the student that applies. When I ask students why they don't apply for scholarships, especially when there is a lack of scholarship applicants, I hear very commonly, "Who would give me money?" And it breaks my heart because I'm like a stranger who also got money from another stranger and we're just paying it forward. So sometimes they don't think they're going to get it. They may not get every scholarship they apply for, but I encourage them be the student that applies. Okay, real talk about loans. Loans are the reality for a lot of our students. We want to make sure students know that they don't have to take out the whole loan amount. They can take out what they need, but maybe don't take out what you want. So if the school offers you $4,000 in loans and you know that you only need two, just take the two because believe me, if you take all 4,000, you will find a way to spend it. So we want to make sure students are taking out what they need. There are two main types of loans that will be offered to students based upon their income, and that's going to be unsubsidized and subsidized. Unsubsidized loans are loans that when the student takes out that loan, the interest starts accruing immediately. Subsidized loans are loans that when the student takes out the loan, the interest is paid for a short period of time, all the way until like a short period of time after graduation. So while the student's in school, the interest is covered, it's subsidized. We want them to take subsidized loans before unsubsidized loans. And you guys don't have to memorize that. We have award letter support so that you can walk through your students through their award letters or financial aid offers to make sure that they're taking what they need. Okay, work study. Work study is, I know, the two words to students, the word work and then the word study are like, ugh, a hard pass. And then you put them together and it's like, gross. No, thank you, ma'am. When I explain what work study is to students, they're like, oh, if you were a work study student, I encourage you, if you feel comfortable, talk to your students about your work study experience. For me, work study was the first time where when I was a student after high school, an employer supported me in my role of being a student. So I was working service industry. I worked a lot of jobs because I did not apply for financial aid my first quarter. Spoilers, I was one of your students that didn't think I could qualify for it, and I could. And so when I got a work study job, it was the first time an employer asked, hey, how's school going? Do you need to take time off for finals? The other thing I love about work study is it gives students on the job experience to help cement the learning of what they're learning in school. So, for example, I had a student that wanted to be an event planner. She just wanted life's beautiful moments to be beautiful. So while doing the curriculum work for hospitality and doing their associates, they were able to go in and get a job and work study in student life. So they learned other things like how to do catering contracts, how to do photo releases, what to do when it snows 3 inches in Olympia and we have 500 burritos and everything shuts down. What do we do with that? And so the student got to learn all these in and outs of the reality of the job versus like the classroom learning. And I thought that was really cool. Students have to opt into work study and it's income based, but I encourage students if they opt into it, they don't have to do the work study. They can decline the award that they're offered. So now that we know the where the funding, types that there are, let's talk about where it comes from. So we have our 4 types of funding. Who is offering those funds? Let's start with the federal government. The federal government offers funds through federal funding that can be used at schools across the US. So it can be used at eligible institutions across the US, but the student has to be eligible for federal funding through the FAFSA. Then we have state funding. State funding is for Washingtonians to go to Washington state schools. So if you think of it this way, federal money has to stay in the federal. State money has to stay in the state. So if a student's getting state funds, then they have to stay in Washington state. If they choose to stay in Washington, and it's a big, beautiful state. So if students want to move, you can drive literally 6 hours in the state. I'm planning on doing it in a couple days. You can drive 6 hours and still be in the same state. So if students are looking for autonomy, believe me, they can still spread their wings and stay in state and get state and federal funding at the same time. Colleges may offer funds through institutional funds to encourage a student to attend that specific institution. There's less requirements around those institutional funds because they aren't state or federal. They don't have the same requirements, which is nice. And then organizations, businesses, churches, nonprofits will be offering things like scholarships or in-kind donations to support students. So let's talk a little bit more about our federal funding. This is going to be the federal Pell Grant, federal work study, those unsubsidized and subsidized loans that we talked about. And then finally, a third type of loan that parents can apply for called a parent loan, or you may have heard of it as Parent Plus loans. That is a loan that stays in the parent's name for the cost of their child's education. So these loans do not transfer to anybody else. They stay in the parent's name and they have different requirements income-wise, as well as they also have um, less flexibilities when it comes to the repayment and waivers. So we want parents to, when they're thinking about parent loans, to think about their own student debt ratio as well when they are pursuing these. I have seen parents who are racking up because there's no overall total of a parent loan. It's just a year over year that has a maximum. So I had a parent that had over 150,000 in Parent Plus loans that I was working with, and they just didn't realize how quickly they had racked up. And so you just want parents to be very aware of that. Then we have Washington state funding. Again, my favorite thing in the whole wide world is Washington state funding because it allows me to do what I love every day. We have that Washington College Grant, which you will also hear as the WA Grant. So they're the same beautiful program, just one's a cute shortened name of the Washington College Grant. We have College Bound, which we'll talk more about in a second. We have State Work Study. Passport to Careers is a program for youth experiencing unaccompanied homelessness and or youth who are alumni or experiencing foster care. We also have the Opportunity Grant and the Bridge Grant. And WASAC implements most of these programs and they are Washington Opportunity Pathways. And that also includes the Washboard. So the College Bound commitment is a 2-step process. So this is for our students that in middle school, they're automatically enrolled if they're eligible for free or reduced price lunch. So in middle school, they get signed up. There's a very small amount of 9th graders that get auto enrolled, but it's tiny. If the students are working with, if they're in foster care or they, even if they go into foster care any point in time between 7th grade all the way through high school, they're just automatically enrolled. So that's one of the only populations that can be enrolled past that middle school time frame. So they're automatically enrolled because we know they're a highly mobile population. Then what happens is they meet the College Bound pledge by meeting the income and residency requirements, and they do that through completing a financial aid application. They have to be accepted to and attend an eligible college within 1 year of graduation. What that means for your students is if they're taking a gap year, sweet. But we know the reality is that gap years turn to gap decades real quick before you even know it. And so before a student takes their gap year, I encourage them try to apply for admissions and ask for deferment if possible. And that way they're already in the system and they already have a plan for when they come back. There is no longer a 5-year window to use their 4 years of funding. Students in the College Bound program have 4 years of funding, and as long as they are accepted to and attend an eligible college within 1 year graduation and meet the other College Bound pledge requirements like graduating, they can use those funds. Let's say they start year one of college and life happens and they have to leave college. And maybe that break is longer than they expected, and maybe they're coming back at 25. Their College Bound is still waiting for them. And I'm really excited about that. The other thing I'm really excited about is the fact that there is no longer a GPA requirement for our students going to the community college. You know how many times it broke our hearts when you'd have a student who'd be like a 198 and they couldn't access their College Bound. If they're going to the community college, there is no longer a GPA requirement. And so I think that's very exciting too. So what this does is College Bound combines with other state aid, and it covers the average cost of tuition at the public rate, some fees, and a small book allowance. That's the commitment of funds, and it can be used at over 65 schools in Washington state. Again, College Bound is a Washington program, so Washington money goes to Washingtonians, and it has to be used within Washington state. So they have to pick a school, public or private, that's from the list of eligible institutions. So these are the two bills that have passed recently that I added to that slide that just talk about the enhancing of the program so that there's no longer that GPA requirement for community and technical colleges. And then that College Bound 5-year window elimination, which is very exciting. And that is brand new. And that means that they have their funds. They can only still fund up to a bachelor's degree, but it just gives them more flexibility if life happens. Passport to Careers is a program for our former foster youth and youth experiencing unaccompanied homelessness. This program gives them two pathways to pursue either college or apprenticeship. I encourage students that if they haven't been assessed for McKinney-Vento and you know that they're in a situation that they are experiencing unaccompanied homelessness, please make sure your school assesses them, because it's not just about financial aid, but it's about making sure they have the support they need to navigate something they should never have to experience. And spoilers, we're going to do a financial aid night in January for our youth who are experiencing unaccompanied homelessness and or foster care so that you can send them to one place to get support completing their applications. We're holding that event in January based upon feedback from students because we want to make sure that they can work during the holiday break and that when holiday help is no longer available, that they're able to come to that event. So that will be right on our website. So let's talk about our timeline. The FAFSA and WAFSA will be available December 1st, 2024 for the 25-26 application. For the class of 2025, they're going to complete the 25-26. I know that sounds super futuristic, but that's when they're going to college, and they're going to use 2023 income information. For right now, this year, it's a December release. And then we'll just kind of go year by year, knowing that the ultimate goal from the federal government is to move it back to a October release. But this year, we're going to embrace, we went from being in a pumpkin spice era, but now we are in our peppermint mocha era. December 1st is when they're going to be able to start applying. Before December 1st, there are things students can do to prepare. They can start gathering their required documents, and we have a postcard you can give to students that list all the documents that they need to apply. They can create their FSA ID or WAFSA account. They only have to create it once, but this is a great time, right? Like not this minute, finish the training, but this is a great time to come up with a plan on how you're going to work with your students to get their FSA IDs. Are you going to hold your own event? Are you going to send them to our event? There's a lot of work that we can do before the December 1 release. December 1st, though, the applications will open and students can apply for financial aid, knowing that they will be applying for financial aid and admissions at the same time. So last year, I had a couple students that I was working with them on financial aid, and they were like, "Oh yeah, and I'm going to go to UW." I'm like, "Awesome, congratulations!" Like, "Yeah, I just still need to apply." We're in May, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, the UW admissions closed in November, and so you want to make sure students are aware of their admissions deadline and their financial aid deadline, as they are very different animals, and making sure they get their information and their applications in on time. I encourage students can use our OtterBot texting program for support with that. The student might receive Something from the college asking them to follow up with information. They could send them a postcard, a letter, a portal notification. I don't care if they send the student a pigeon with a note attached to its leg saying, hey, we need some information from you. No matter how they reach out, if the student doesn't respond, especially if they're picked for verification, the financial aid office cannot release funds. So if your student's picked for verification, if the college is reaching out to the student, it's not typically because they want to be pen pals, it's because there's something they need to complete. Then they're going to assess their award letters, their financial aid offer, and then they're going to accept the award for the college they're going to attend. To apply for financial aid, students are going to need a driver's license or state ID. They're going to need their income information for 2023. They're also going to need their parents' information. And if they're under the age of 24, their parents most likely will have to participate in the process by providing their own information as a contributor. For FAFSA filers themselves, the students will need access to their social security card or their green card. Spoilers, it's not green, but they're either one of those they'll need access to. And for their parent, if the parent has a social, they'll need access to their card. And if they don't, no worries. There is no requirement of a student's parent to have a social security number. Mixed status families have access to aid just like anybody else. They want to make sure that they're applying using the FAFSA because we are looking at student eligibility and never the parent's eligibility. So the rule of one, we have 2 financial aid applications in Washington State, but you are only going to have a student complete one. Please. The reason I say this is our students are geniuses and they're like, if I file the FAFSA, I might get this much money. So if I file the WAFSA, I'll get double the money. That's not the case. Students don't get double the money when they double down on applications. All they give me is double gray hairs as I try to figure out which application they really wanted to apply for to maximize their aid. So this is the rule I use. If a student is eligible for federal aid, and that typically means they're like a US citizen or from a freely associated states like Marshall Islands, or they're considered a eligible non-citizen. This means like refugee status and other types of statuses. They're going to fill out the FAFSA. If the student doesn't have a social security number, they are not a US citizen, they are not eligible for federal aid, no worries at all. Because in Washington, we don't care about citizenship status. We care that you can survive Washington State for 12 rainy, gray, sunny, smoky months. And then you're one of us because we look at residency. And so we will have those students complete the WAFSA. If the student is not sure which one to do, no worries at all. They're just going to go to our WAFSA page, wasac.wa.gov/WAFSA. They're going to answer 3 questions and it's going to tell them which application to do. I encourage you when you're holding a financial aid night, never refer to it as a FAFSA night because it's exclusive of the WAFSA. And I get phone calls every year of like, when's our WAFSA night? And we never want to hold a separate WAFSA night because now you're just basically getting all of your undocumented students in one space, and that's not safe either. So we encourage inclusive financial aid nights that include FAFSA and WAFSA. And if your students don't know which application to do, if you have like a computer bank, open all of them up to the WAFSA and let that assess students instead of us assessing students. The first step to the FAFSA is going to be an FSA ID. So this is the account creation that the student's going to use to access their financial aid, their loans, everything. For parents to be able to sign applications and contribute, the student and the parent will create their own depending on the student's circumstances if they're considered dependent. So most students under the age of 24 will have to have parent information. Social security numbers are not required for the parents for their FSA ID. They just need to check, as you can see here, that green square there. If they check on that, it's going to gray out the social security number and they'll just continue with the questions. No longer are families putting zeros in on the FAFSA instead of a social security number. So you're just going to check the box and let it gray out. Don't put zeros in. Students are going to need their own email address, and we encourage them not to use their high school email address because they lose access after they graduate. This is a great time for your students to think about creating an email address that they're going to check on a regular basis that won't make an admissions officer blush. I say that from personal experience where I used to have my boss slide me email addresses on the applications and say, read this out loud. And there were literal email addresses I couldn't read out loud without losing my job. Don't be that student. I always tell students, make it something that you're going to be able to use on scholarships and it won't make people blush. FSA ID changes. Starting last year, every contributor needs an FSA ID if they filed separate taxes. So in some cases, only one parent needs an FSA ID, but in other cases, both parents will need to contribute. The FSA ID, to be verified for those who have a social security number, it takes 1 to 3 days. For those who do not have a social security number creating an FSA ID, this year there is currently a waiver that allows those without social security numbers to create an FSA ID and then have it automatically temporarily verified so that they can go right into the application and use it. Those families will still have to go through an identity verification process in the future once they have that process laid out more clearly. So for right now, it's going to work, but we want to make sure that those families know that there's an extra step that they're going to have to take after they come up with a process for verifying. No longer does the FAFSA have a standalone signature page. So this is a little bit more about those flexibilities for individuals without social security numbers. Last year, this wasn't enacted until like April, and it was a smooth workaround for the challenges we were experiencing. I encourage you when it comes to creating those FSA IDs with those without social security numbers this year to please re-engage in that because this process has been set from day one. It's going to be a lot easier for us to help them get their FSA IDs. This is what the current FAFSA page looks like. The website and paper are the two ways to apply. I encourage you to have your students use the website. Paper applications were not processed this year, like students who submitted applications starting in late December, early January of last year, their applications weren't processed until August. For those who turned in a paper app and need to correct their paper app, 20% of those applications were returned directly back to students. And students can't participate in a paper correction until later this month. That's for last year's applications. So we want to be very sparing on the use of paper applications as federal student aid has not told us the order in which they are going to be processing applications. The application's available in English and Spanish, and it's free. The FAFSA is free, the WAFSA is free. If anyone's trying to charge your students to apply for financial aid, even if it's support because they can maximize their money, students are paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I heard of one the other day that was $800 to apply for financial aid simply because they needed translated language support. Our 12th year campaign events are in English and Spanish, and if students are being charged for those resources, I highly encourage them to come to our events for free for support. Our WAFSA, here's the start page that asks the questions that will determine if you are doing the FAFSA or the WAFSA. They have to create accounts as well through the WAFSA, but just for the student, not the parent at this point. The parent will do something at the end of the application, but for the beginning of the application, we want the student to create their account. It's available in English and Spanish. Students going to use their own email, and they're going to need internet access. So now that we talked about applications and the timeline, here are our most common errors. So right now, what I am seeing for common errors from the end of last year to now is the main one is legal information. So Social Security matches the information that's provided on the FAFSA in their database. If the student lists their name and not and maybe a name that's a shortened version, or they don't put their name in as exactly listed on their Social Security card for the FAFSA, then it won't match their FSA ID. This brings up two challenges. One, there will be times when the name doesn't fit. As someone who has my own shortened version of a very long name, my name has never fit on these things. You're going to put in all of the characters until there's no more room for students whose names are longer than the number of characters available. The other challenge that I see here is that this is going to require a student to use a name that is listed on a Social Security card, and this potentially means that a student could be dead named, which means we are asking them to use a name that maybe is a birth name that they no longer identify with, and it can be it can be deadly. It's not a good situation for students to be in. I encourage, if that's the case, that students are using their preferred, which is just their name, but using their preferred name on their admissions application so that they can connect the two records. And then I acknowledge to students that this is a flawed system that is going to be using data matched to Social Security, and that as soon as their name is changed legally with Social Security, we can switch everything over. But until then, unfortunately, we have to use the information that they have. And I think just acknowledging that that's a flaw in the system and that we are working towards more equity for these students is helpful in the process. I encourage when you are having a financial aid event, especially if it's a large scale event, to have an office open with one of the counselors so that if something happens during an event that triggers a student, that they have a space to process this away from their peers. I say that because I've been doing this for a long time. I have seen students who find out they're undocumented at these events. I had a student who found out that her parents got divorced, but they never told her because they were waiting till after the holidays. And then when they asked about who's the parent, the student was told, like literally at the event, oh no, actually we are divorced and we were going to tell you. And it just gutted the student because then she had to say it out. Oh, my parents are divorced. And it was the first time she said it out loud and she just started crying. We want to make sure we have space if we're opening up traumas, that they can process that away, because we're asking about family structure that's biological and not chosen, and other structure issues. So I just encourage that we be mindful of it when we're doing our financial aid events. A lot of students are going to apply for the wrong financial aid year. They're going to apply like they're going to college right now. We want to make sure that they're applying for the year that they're going to go to college. Last year, a lot of students didn't sign to submit their applications. Part of that was a glitch. And part of it was that students just didn't click submit. And then the other one is just using the correct parent, making sure that you're using the parent wizard if the parents are divorced to ensure that you're accurately selecting, or not you, but the student is accurately selecting the parent that needs to provide information. And this year, they are providing that tool, the parent wizard, outside of the application so you can use it earlier. That way you can send it to students ahead of time so they can have these conversations before they come to your event. You are going to find that students are going to have situations where their income has changed from 2 years ago to now. If that is the case, they can ask for a financial aid appeal if there's a decrease in income. Swift Student is an appeal generator. What I love about this is it asks students in very plain language questions, and then it takes all of those answers and populates a very financial aid specific language email. And so this is very helpful because I'll have students who don't even know how to start creating their appeal letter. And this does all the formatting. This asks them for supporting documentation, and it can really capture any of these appeal reasons. It's free to use. It's not shared with third parties. And I really just think it's a good use of being able to like hand a tool to a student so that they can pursue this themselves. Ultimately, you will eventually have students who do not qualify for federal or state funding, depending on how long they've been here. And if that's the case, I encourage you to work with these students on scholarships. So while everyone else is applying for federal and state aid, you are going to have these students use things like the Immigrants Rising page, which has 8 pages of scholarships that have no citizenship requirements. And this list has what I call the unicorn of scholarships. It has scholarships for advanced degrees like master's degrees, not just fellowships. So I encourage using this list. The only time your student's going to be asked to pay to apply for financial aid is going to be the CSS profile. The CSS profile is an additional profile. It's a College Board tool. And what it does is it's a more in-depth profile looking at the family's ability to pay. So it's going to ask more in-depth questions of these students. It is something that only 2 colleges in Washington use. Whitman requires it, Whitworth utilizes it. Out of Washington State, other schools do use this. A lot of the Ivy Leagues use this. If your family makes less than $100,000 a year, then they will waive the $25 initial and the report fees. If the family makes above 100,000, then they will pay those fees. But if it's a financial hardship, I would still have them reach out to the College Board. Another thing we talked about was verification, and we just want a norm verification for students. There have been verification waivers that have reduced the amount of students that are verified, but we know eventually those will go away. Verification is a random and standard practice to clarify information and to verify the information. So the federal government can request that someone is verified on a random pool. So like, okay, 1 in 4 are going to get pulled for this, or 1 in 5, used to be 1 in 3. Or the college can say, hey, let's flag this record to get clarifying information. For example, sometimes students will list their parents' assets as their own, or their parents' income as their own. So one time I had a student that they were like, mom made 40,000 last year, which means I made 40,000, and they listed that they made 40,000. And so the college saw that the student and the parent made the exact same amount, and also that the 17-year-old made $40,000 last year. And I was like, I'm in the wrong field. And so they contacted the student. The student's like, no, no, I didn't make it. My mom made it. Okay, they adjusted it, and that opened up a lot more gift aid for the student. So they can ask to clarify, or it can be random. No matter what, student has to respond in order to get their funds. Don't be afraid of the financial aid office staff. They are there to help. It breaks their heart when they cannot award those funds out to the student. Now that we talked about verification, navigating situations, sticking points, when the application comes out, let's talk about resources. So the first one is the 12th year campaign. I am half of the 12th year campaign. It is a campaign to support those who are helping students with financial aid and admissions. We have free trainings, just like this one right here. We have printed and digital resources, and then we have online financial aid completion and information events. You can order, when you sign up for our program, you can order free materials as well. And we have like Financial Aid 101 templates. The presentation's already done for you, so you don't have to create it. If you don't want to give the presentation, we have it recorded where Yasleen does it in Spanish and I do it in English. So you have both options. You want to give it yourself, but you're not sure about like the slides. I put notes in there in English and Spanish for you so that you can go ahead and read the presentation off if you're not comfortable. We have a lot of tools to help you with Financial Aid 101 for your students, as well as we have events to help support you. So Yaseleen's located on the east side. I'm located on the west side, and we are here to serve you as you serve your students. We have Financial Aid Advising Day lesson plans. Y'all gave us feedback, and we took it and made things into one-pagers. So the lesson plans, there's 5 of them. They cover all of the topics of FAD and the required reporting of FAD. So this is tools that you can use to share. Maybe you don't have the capacity to do an FSA ID account creation, but maybe you have an intern. Maybe you have an Avid classroom. These lesson plans are written in a way that anyone can use them and use the tools in them to support it. So it's broken down into like how to do this activity. If you have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, if you have more than an hour to do these activities, reach out. I will create you a lesson plan that is more in depth and is longer than 45 minutes. We have a Padlet for students. You can share this with students, and it walks them through each step of applying for aid, where they can get help, and where they can get help after they arrive at their campus, after they graduate. So this has support for over the summer as well. For you, we've created your College Access Resource Padlet. What I love about this Padlet is I update it pretty free. I mean, like every couple days, it feels like right now, so that you have access to updates about financial aid. This is more in depth than the student Padlet. So I would not share this one with students because they're going to be confused by all of the resources, but it has everything you could possibly want on financial aid. You can subscribe. If you're logged into your Google account, you can subscribe to this and it just notifies you when I update it. Then we have our Washington College Grant training videos in multiple languages. These are short videos that you can share with your students. We even have a quiz that we built and curriculum that go with these. If you want to know how your schools are doing for financial aid completion, we have financial aid data. Now, the data for the class of 25 will not be out till the end of December because we don't get our first data like dump of information usually till a couple weeks after the application opens. So at the end of December, early January, you'll be able to see aggregate data, as well as if you have an individual account, you can see student-specific data. To see that student-specific data, you're going to have a data sharing agreement and a non-disclosure agreement to access it, but anyone can access aggregate data if you're not eligible. So eligible groups are typically our high school staff who are in building, who are serving all students. You want to play in the 25-26 application? I know you do. There is a prototype for that where you can go in. You can't break it. I tried. And you can play in the application as a student, as a parent, all the different roles so you can see what it's going to look like this year. If you don't want to play in the prototype, no worries. Please join us next month for our financial aid navigation webinar. We are going to walk through the FAFSA and the WAFSA from a student and parent perspective. If you've got questions about student loans, we've got answers. We have our student loan advocate office that are here to support you. If you are a consumer of loans or you want to utilize the resources to support your students as to better understand loans, they have so much information. Maybe you yourself have a loan and you're curious about what is going on with all these different payment plans and what's going on with Save and what's going on with that. They have webinars all the time to support you. Federal Student Aid also has a toolkit with their resources to help you, and they are adding to this. They are currently testing language and processes for FSA ID creation across the nation in person to see how their materials are received by students and parents. And at the end of September, early October, they're going to release all of those tested languages to us to use with students. For those who love our college and career knowledge, we have enhanced them even further by creating lesson plans. So, this is a team effort. Shout out to everyone who's been working in college and career knowledge. You now have lesson plans to support your students through all of the chapters. You can order college and career knowledge and all of our other resources from College Bound, OtterBot, and the 12th year campaign all through one registration form now. So you can get all of your materials in one place. Please coordinate with district staff as well and your other CBOs that are working at your school to make sure that you're all not ordering materials for the same population. I've had that happen where like schools reach out and be like, we have 400 extra books, so they didn't know who was ordering. So just make sure you're coordinating as you order. Materials take between 2 and 4 weeks to arrive.